Welcome to this training about building a respectful workplace. In this training, you will learn how to use consent in your role as a student employee. My name is Katie Parks, and I'm an assistant director in the CWU Office of Health Promotion. I've been working in the field of violence prevention and response since 2016. My work involves teaching tools for respectful, healthy communication, like consent and boundaries. In my free time, I enjoy hiking, reading, and spending time outdoors. Here at CWU, we are committed to fostering a community where respect is the cornerstone of all of our interactions. We can use skills like practicing consent, setting and respecting boundaries, and helping out in problem situations to build this culture at CWU. Today, we'll be focusing on practicing consent in the workplace. So, what is consent? If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write down what consent means to you. Consent generally means agreement, approval, or permission. We often talk about consent in sexual situations, but consent can be used in the workplace to build respectful relationships and maintain professionalism. Consent is a skill that benefits from practice. Here at CWU, we use the acronym CATS to describe the various elements of consent. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and answer the question for each letter of CATS. Think about these questions specifically as they relate to consent. And as a hint, some questions may have more than one correct answer. All right, let's review the correct answers. Can communication be verbal, nonverbal, or both/either? Communication can be verbal or nonverbal. Nonverbal communication carries more risk of miscommunication or lack of understanding, so it is best used with coworkers you know well. What does agreement mean? Agreement means everyone must understand what they're consenting or agreeing to, and agreement continues throughout the experience or relationship. In a workplace, this could mean the project or professional relationship. Signing a contract might be appropriate in some circumstances, but it isn't necessary in most interactions that involve consent in the workplace. And if someone is unsure if they want to participate, that is not agreement. It's an opportunity for further discussion and understanding why they aren't sure. Can consent be taken away? Yes, consent can be taken away or changed at any time. And lastly, what does straightforward mean? Straightforward means there are no assumptions or ambiguity to agree, and no one should feel pressured, forced, or convinced to agree. It is important to have some form of communication to make sure everyone is on the same page. And no one should ever feel like they can't say no, because that isn't consent. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write down your ideas about what might complicate consent in the workplace. The primary factor that complicates consent in the workplace is power dynamics. This could be because of someone's position, title, social identities, or all of the above. Imagine your supervisor asks you to stay late, but your housemates are relying on you to help them host a special dinner that evening. Do you feel like you can say no to your supervisor? You might feel pressured or forced to agree, either directly or indirectly. Power dynamics infringe on the straightforwardness of consent. Another factor is conflicts of interest. For example, if a big donor to your department asks you to do something outside of your role, you might feel pressured to do so. Once again, you might not feel like you can say no. A third factor is economic dependence. If your supervisor asks you to do something that feels demeaning and isn't in your job description, you may feel like you have to because you need the money to pay for school or basic necessities. And a final factor is geographies. Let's say you're working in a small mailroom with 3 other people. One person consistently grazes your private parts as they walk by you in the mailroom. It might be hard to tell if this is intentional and hard to ask them to stop if there just isn't enough space. So all of these factors can make consent more complicated in the workplace. It's important to keep these in mind as you're navigating professional relationships and communication. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write 3 ways you can use consent in the workplace. So here are some examples of workplace consent. You can ask your coworker if it's okay to take a photo or video of them, post that photo or video on the department's website or social media account, touch their body, like their hair, back, or arms, hug them, sit next to or with them, shut a door to a confined space, give them feedback or advice, or use their equipment or supplies. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write down an example of how you might ask a coworker for consent. There are lots of ways to ask a coworker for consent, but the most important thing is to use language you're comfortable with. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write 3 consent questions you would feel comfortable using in the workplace. Consent and boundaries work together to make sure everyone's needs are being respected. Each consent question comes with a boundary answer, whether that answer is sure thing, absolutely not, or something in between. For more information about using boundaries in the workplace, check out our Wildcats Respect Boundaries for Student Employees training. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write down how you might respond if you ask a coworker for consent and they say no. If you ask a coworker for consent and they say no, here are some tips for how to manage the rejection professionally. Don't try to convince or coerce them. Respect their boundary. Consider asking if they'd be open to a different activity or approach. Maintain your professionalism. Be kind, courteous, and flexible. Don't get defensive. It's not about you or something you did wrong. We all have job expectations, but each employee will complete those expectations differently and have different needs and limits around them. If you're concerned about a coworker saying no to something you think is a job expectation, you should talk with your supervisor about how to navigate the situation. And that brings us to our last bit of information for this training: who to contact if you need additional support or have a concern. Your first step should be to contact your supervisor. They should be able to help you with most concerns and support needs. If you don't feel comfortable or if your concern is about your supervisor, your next step is to contact their supervisor. Continue up the chain of command as needed. And if you're continuing to have an issue, you can contact the Student Employment Office, and they can be reached at seo@cwu.edu. If you're using the worksheet, pause the video and write down 3 things you learned from this training. Great job completing this training on using consent in the workplace. For more information, we encourage you to check out the resources included on this slide. You can also find them in the video description. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to email us at healthpromotion@cwu.edu. Follow us on Instagram at @CWHealthPromotion to learn more about our upcoming events and giveaways. Thank you for taking the time to learn how to build a culture of respect at CWU.